Hi, I'm Philip Hundl. I'm an attorney with Wadler, Perches, Hundl, and Kerlick, and I'd like to introduce Carrie Whittick. She's an attorney here at Wadler, Perches, Hundl, and Kerlick, and her practice area covers a lot of different areas, but primarily she does transactional work and corporate work. And so talking about kind of corporate formation, I know we get a lot of clients come to the office, and I get a lot of people calling and asking me this question all the time, is about LLCs. Should I form an LLC? What is an LLC? And there's various different corporate structures, right?
Sure.
So maybe if you would, and we're doing this WPHK office hours as kind of a frequently asked questions we get, so that so folks out there, maybe they watch this video, get some of their questions answered. So with that, tell us maybe what kind of entities are out there, and then why is kind of LLCs the entity du jour today?
Sure. Yeah, so as you mentioned, Philip, there are a variety of different entities that are available. Some of them have been around a little bit longer than others. Most people are familiar with the concept of a corporation. Generally, it could be described as a separate legal entity that will provide a bunch of advantages to potential owners. The greatest one, of course, is it provides personal liability protection for the shareholders or the owners of the company. And what that means is, in the event there were any sort of liability or claim attached to the business dealings of the entity, the owner, as the shareholder, would have all of their personal assets protected, which of course is a big benefit. Although in Texas it's a very debtor-friendly state, there are many clients who have acquired a lot of wealth and assets, and they're very interested in protecting those, and a corporation is a great way to do that. Another advantage of a corporation is it allows for easily raising capital, provides for a lot of flexibility. However, there is sort of a dual-tiered structure. You've got the shareholders who are the owners. They will elect a board of directors, and the board of directors is an individual or individuals who will essentially manage the company. They can appoint officers who will kind of direct the day-to-day operational activities, or they can kind of manage it at that level. But there is sort of a formalized structure that's in place, and it's been established over years of legal jurisprudence. I guess I should say kind of the simplest structure is just a sole proprietorship, which is basically just client just deciding to open up shop, doing business in their own name, or perhaps creating a DBA or an assumed name. But the biggest disadvantage to operating in that manner is you don't have any sort of liability protection. So you are, in effect, the business. If the business is sued, your personal assets are potentially at risk. And
we see that right away. We may have a client come in, and I'm just going to make up a name, but it'll be Smith's AC, and so we think, okay, well, Smith's air conditioning service. We start looking to see if it's a corporation or an LLC or a partnership, and they just say, well, I'm doing business as, okay, well then it's going to be John Smith. Individually, sole proprietorship, and frankly that kind of at least throws up a lot of red flags for me, because that person is completely wide open to liability in the event they don't have insurance, or if their insurance is surpassed, right? So
exactly.
So we talked about corporation. I know there's some other entities out there maybe we can touch on, and some of these I know we could spend a lot of time on, but just quickly, partnership or limited partnership.
Sure. So a general partnership is basically an operation or an endeavor that involves two or more individuals. The downside to a general partnership is both of those individuals have unlimited liability, which is similar to a sole proprietorship. However, the added detriment in conducting business in that way is that essentially both partners or all the partners could potentially be liable for the acts of their other partners. So it adds a little bit of an added risk that is not necessarily something that will be desirable. So to sort of hedge against some of those risks, a lot of people, especially in days of old, would set up a limited partnership. Essentially what a limited partnership is, it allows two or more people to conduct business as a joint operation, but it provides limited liability to those folks who are acting as limited partners. Now, the downside is you do have to have at least one general partner, and that partner is subject to unlimited liability. But you do get added protection for the limited partners The downside of being a limited partner, though, is that you really don't have any say-so in the management or operation of the company. Those tasks are retained exclusively by the general partner. So those are kind of the balances between those two classes of ownership.
And now, going through all those different entities, it seems that what we've talked about, a LLC, limited liability company, checks almost all the boxes. And so that's why we see the proliferation of the LLCs, and everyone talks about an LLC, and Google LLC, and it's everywhere on the internet. So now we can talk about
Sure.
LLCs. So go ahead.
So an LLC is really the best of all worlds. So with an LLC, you form a separate legal entity, which is a separate legal person. However, as an owner of the LLC, you have limited liability. So similar to a corporation, your personal assets are not at risk if there are any liabilities that are associated with the operation of the company. The other benefit to an LLC is there's a lot of flexibility. So you can either run it as a member, so that's called a member-managed LLC, where basically as the owner, which is analogous to a shareholder in a corporation, you have the right to make the day-to-day decisions. And remember, like we talked before, the shareholders in a corporation don't necessarily have the right to make the day-to-day decisions. It's not true with an LLC. The members have a lot more direct participation. You can also set it up to have a manager-managed LLC, which is similar to a corporation, where you set up a board of managers, which looks like a board of directors in a corporation. The managers are the ones that would make the decision. And the great thing about that is if you have certain individuals that you want to hire that have more knowledge in the particular area that you want to conduct business, you can appoint them as managers. They don't necessarily have to have any ownership interest in the company. So that's kind of a nice little feature of that entity as well. It's very flexible, like I mentioned. You create a company agreement, which kind of sets out the rights and duties of all of the members, and you can essentially include whatever provisions that you want. If it's not addressed in the company agreement, then generally Texas law will provide how the company is governed, or if there are issues that come up, how those are dealt with. But it gives a lot of flexibility. You can determine how distributions are made, how operational decisions are made. You can provide for different buyout provisions to address the interactions amongst the owners. So it's a nice little entity, and I think due to those facts, the flexibility, the limited liability protection, and kind of all the other bells and whistles that are available, I think this is the reason that this is probably our most requested and most popular, most recommended entity for most clients.
Well, Carrie, this has been great. You've covered a lot of territory. I feel like I just took my, legal entities class in law school. We've covered everything. What I'd like to do is cover, in another segment, really now, let's just focus on the LLC. So everyone stay tuned. We'll have another frequently asked questions, or I guess we've been calling it now WPHK office hours. So stay tuned for another WPHK office hours. Thanks.